This is Dateline News and Conversation. My guest tonight needs no introduction. Mr. Bruce Gagnon, my longtime friend from Brunswick, Maine. Bruce, welcome back to the show.
Howdy, Regis. Good to see you.
Always. We don't do this often enough, Bruce. All right, listen, there's a lot to talk about tonight. Uh, I know that in the United States, and really specifically where you're located in Maine, everybody seems to be focused entirely on the genocide in Gaza. Attention to Ukraine, attention to China uh, has drifted away. Tell me what you're involved in, what you think about what Trump is doing and Netanyahu are doing in Gaza, and where that's going.
Well, first of all, I don't agree with your word, everybody. Just in my own case, for example, I still blog about the situation between Russia and Ukraine all the time. I'm constantly analyzing Trump's uh, position on that issue, uh, and uh, and there are people around the country, not as many as we might wish, but there are people around the country that are still following this Russia-Ukraine story. But it is true that the majority of activists, I'd say, are working on three things in this country right now. One is Gaza. That's a big, big area where people are focusing. Number two is the people that are being kicked out of colleges and in some cases deported or jailed, waiting for deportation, especially students of Palestinian origin or other international origin. And then the liberals, with groups like Indivisible, Democratic Party run front groups, they're out on the street with in general talking about democracy. We've got to restore our democracy. Like last week, when we were doing our weekly vigil in Brunswick, where I live, at downtown, the heart of downtown at noontime, we had about seven of us there. And an older woman comes up to me and says, "Why don't you people come to our indivisible protests?" And I said, "Do you ever hold signs about Gaza?" And she says, "Oh, we care so much about that. But, it's just too much. We just can't take and do everything." I said, "Well, I've seen pictures of your events, and there's all kinds of signs about all kinds of things, but there's never anything about Palestine." "Oh, we care so much about it, really, but we just can't do everything." And then I said to her, "Tell me, are you concerned about budget cuts in this country, which is a big story too right now? Social spending, going after Medicaid, for example, which is health care for poor people and people who have various maladies and can't, work." And her answer is, "Oh, yes, we really care about that." I said, "Well, then tell me, how do you expect we're ever going to be able to afford to pay for social spending as long as the government is spending well over $1 trillion a year on the military budget?" "Oh, oh, yes, that is so important. We just can't do everything." So that's the Democrats right now. That's where their heads are. They're only doing what the Democrat Party is telling them. Don't get off into foreign policy. Don't talk about military spending. Stay focused on democracy because we got to prepare for the next by-elections in 2026 when all the House seats in the House of Representatives are open for a challenge, and about half of the Senate seats are open for challenge. That's what the Democrats are aiming towards, and they're using their front groups to work on that. At the same time, the neocons in Washington that are both in the in the political institutions and in the media, they are constantly at war with Trump. Not that he's doing much good, believe me, that's for sure. But the fact that he is having some negotiations between Russia and Ukraine is a slightly positive thing. Although I don't really believe that in the end Trump is going to stop the war. All he's got to do is stop the money, cut the money, don't give him any more money, don't give him any more weapons. It's done. But because he's at war with these neocons, they're fighting over that, and he's afraid to take them on. And as well as he's getting pressure from the neocons in Europe, at the EU, NATO, who are also taking that same position. They fully support, obviously, Ukraine. So anyway, that's basically the picture here these days, and it's very frustrating because there's very little mainstream media coverage of Gaza. It's getting a little bit, some cracks there, a little bit, uh, but by and large, the media is still well under control of the war machine here in this country.
All right, so let's stick with Palestine. Um, China did something very bold here over the weekend. Uh, I saw a video with a huge Chinese cargo plane escorted by 4 or 5 Chinese fighter jets. They were flying over Gaza, Palestine, and were airdropping humanitarian aid. Did you hear
I
about
think
that?
yeah, I saw that video, but it appears that that's not a real thing. It's some kind of mock-up or, anyway, it's not real. It didn't happen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, I was talking to somebody who was um, pretty much into all of this stuff. He claimed that he read somewhere that President Z had told Netanyahu to back off or else, implying that China was going to enter the, the conflict. Have you heard anything about that?
My perception of what Z said was back off. The or else part, I'm not so sure that he said that. He might have implied that, but I don't think it was that direct. But there are some trends that are happening. Uh, Several European countries at the high level have now told, including the UK, which is surprising. Uh, but anyway, several European countries have told Netanyahu to stop, and so that's big. That's big development. They say there were 500,000 people protesting in Norway over the last weekend. Everybody was wearing red, So anyway, I think that as we're on the precipice of just slaughter and massive starvation, especially of children in Gaza, some countries are under enormous pressure from their citizens. I noticed in Norway, these same people that are out in the streets have created a new political party that they're going to use to challenge their sort of neocon current government in Norway. So anyway, we'll see. They're carrying signs, Yankee, go home. We don't want your bases here in Norway, things
Yeah.
like that. So,
Yeah.
I think there's some things developing around the world, and it's largely because of the slaughter of the Palestinian people, not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank too now. But we need a lot more of it, especially from the United States.
Yeah, I think we're seeing populist uprisings across the EU, in Berlin, in Paris, in Italy, uh, against some of it looks like it's focused on Ukraine, some of it looks like it's focused on Palestine, but most of it is focused against these unelected leaders in the EU,
Yeah.
that these people in these formerly sovereign independent countries, the people don't like it and are rising up. We're seeing it happen in elections. This election recently, just yesterday in Romania, again is being challenged. Russia is even involved in challenging that this election was interfered with by Brussels.
Yeah, and
So,
by France, and specifically by France.
yeah, well, France is very much involved in Armenia, and not only there, but all in all of their former colonies in Africa. Anyway, I want to stay on Palestine because I haven't done very much on Palestine except with Dimitri Lascaris, who I know you're familiar with him. He did a show that I watched last night with a reporter from, I think he was from one of the Arab countries. Um, Dimitri's tone has gotten very somber. Uh, he seemed to feel like the genocide was almost complete. The guy that he was interviewing felt that within a month, if something doesn't happen, Gaza is gone. The genocide is over. And Dimitri, who's a lawyer, a big time lawyer in the United States and in Europe, now retired, he said, as a lawyer, every single leader across the EU and in the United States, including in the Senate and in the Congress, who have supported Israel, need to be dragged into The Hague, put on trial, let them defend themselves. He said, I don't know what kind of defense they could come up with, but they all should then be put in a cell for the rest of their lives. And then he came back and he said almost immediately, I've been against capital punishment all my life, but in this case, all of these leaders deserve to die. Wow, Bruce, what are your thoughts?
Well, I share I share many of those same sentiments as Dimitri. But one thing happened last month. Malaysia called for the UN to kick Israel out. And I think this is exactly what needs to happen. And people around the world need to carry out that same call and same demand. I shared that information widely on social media, just trying to get it out there in more places so more people would see it and know about it. But I think it's the only way to proceed. Israel is a pariah, and it has to be seen as a pariah by everybody around the world. They've become a pirate nation, and what they're doing is pure evil, and it must be uh, named that, and they must be kicked out of every international organization of any kind, whether it's soccer, whether it's this Euro Song Fest competition they have, or and the UN and everything else. Israel needs to be labeled as a pariah and removed from everything. The flights into Tel Aviv need to be stopped from every airline. We should be demanding that every airline stop flying into Israel. All these kind of things need to be done. The same kind of treatment that South Africa got during the days of apartheid. I was active on that issue at the time, and I saw that really crescendo And those kind of calls and demands internationally are what really toppled the apartheid government in South Africa. I have a feeling that it's beginning to boil now around the world, but it needs to come to a full boil, those demands and those kind of actions taken against Israel.
Yeah, I heard one person was analyzing what was going on, regardless of whether Israel stops now or completes the genocide. Israel has lost whatever sympathy and credibility they've had as a result of World War II and the Holocaust. They've lost it all. They've lost this sympathy throughout the entire world, in spite of the fact that all of these governments have been incapable of doing something. But the people and the governments, I think, no longer will be able to support Israel and Netanyahu. And Dmitry Laskaris has said several times on my shows, and other people as well, Israel will not be able to recover even economically from what they're doing now because their entire economy has been turned inside out. The Yemenis have blockaded all of the ships coming to provide Israel with everything they need. Uh, I wonder how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. In this country, the last poll I saw was like 70% of the American people want this slaughter, this genocide to end in Palestine. And that's an indication that even here, where the support for Israel was always fundamentally strong as you could ever imagine, that's collapsing. And so just imagine if that's happening here, everywhere else around the world, it's way beyond that. Okay. Probably in most countries, it's in the 90 or 95 or 100% opposing Israel. So I think it's true that Israel is finished. And as long as they continue with this, it only worsens their condition. But, what's most important right now is in Gaza, the children, the mothers, people that are being just blown up, hundreds every day, killed for no reason whatsoever, and no food, water, medicine getting in. They did send in 9 trucks the other day. I heard under pressure, Netanyahu allowed 9 trucks. It's like not even a drop in the bucket. And but then I think they ended up destroying some of the stuff they brought in because that's what they do often when it's brought in and stored somewhere before it's handed out. They blow it up. I've seen images of that just in the last days where hospitals have been storing medical aid that they have received over time. Israel's blowing that up. So I mean, it's unbelievable.
An analyst, commentator from the Middle East, one of the other Arab countries, who is against all this colonialism, imperialism, and the United States, blah, 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 blah. When he was told that a lot of people are rising up in America against this genocide, he said, yeah, but he said, Israel still has a mistress in bed in the White House.
Mm.
And what he was talking about was IPAC, not only controlling individual Congress people, but actually in bed in the White House. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. No doubt about it. APAC, American Israeli Political Action Committee. They fund the majority of the members of the US Congress. And if anybody refuses to support Israel, to do whatever APAC tells them to do, then they're threatened with being taken out in the next election. In the last election, they took out two black members of the House of Representatives and spent like $1 million or something like that to destroy them in their campaigns, with television ads and everything. And they defeated them just because they dared stand against AIPAC. Uh, it's terrible. One thing, though, is the peace movement in Israel is very weak, and it's been very docile since this whole thing began. They were hiding for a long time. But in the recent weeks, they've begun to emerge. They've begun to be more active on the street. And just the other day, they organized a protest trying to get to the Rafah gate there. And they had Palestinians who live in greater Israel and Israeli activists together trying to go there. The police stopped them, roughed them up, arrested some of them. But anyway, it was a good effort on their part, and it got a lot of coverage around the world, showing once again how Israel even goes after their own people if they dare stand up, against this insanity.
Okay. If you don't mind, I want to segue to a related topic. Donald Trump. Uh, from where I'm sitting, and when you asked me offline what people thought about Trump, uh, he's a clown. They see him posing as the Pope, saying he could be a good Pope. He'd make a good Pope. Uh, they see him uh, traveling to the Middle East. He travels to Europe, I don't know if it was Brussels, but he's been meeting with all the foreign heads, and he's acting like he's the crown prince king of planet Earth. And people here are looking at him and they're laughing. They think that, I mean, this is a joke. Now, before we talk about Trump and Ukraine, Bruce, what are people in our country, my country? I mean, I know there's the MAGA group and there's the Democrats, but 350 million people have got to be watching this show. Okay, what are people? What can people? And I mean, I don't even know how to ask you the question. What the hell can they be thinking and feeling when they're feeling it in the grocery store, at the gas pump? They're feeling it in the unemployment lines. They're feeling it because they're working 2 and 3 jobs at a McDonald's, at a cell phone kiosk or something like that. What the hell is going on in America right now? Do you have a sense of that?
I think so. I think in general, his base, the MAGA group, as you called them, are largely at this time staying with him. I think there is some level, some number, some small percent of people that are backing away from him. But generally, uh, some people in his, constituency, they like it that he's crazy and all this kind of thing. They think it's fun, and they think he's a fun character. So, and then of course the Democrats, of course they hate him, but there's and I don't know how many people are in the middle actually. I know the peace movement hates him and are working hard to expose him and to resist what he's doing. Although the problem is that Trump controls the entire Congress. They can essentially pass anything they want. And the Democrats are very weak, and they don't really stand and fight on key issues like military spending, for example.
Let me ask you this, Bruce. Let me ask
Draining
you
the
this.
budget.
Has Trump presented any specific legislation yet to his Republican controlled Senate and Congress? Or is he just signing these freaking, executive orders. I mean, what the hell is going on there?
There's a lot of division right now within the Republican Party in Congress, especially in the House of Representatives, over a tax bill that Trump wants. And see, there are people in the Republican Party that are worried about the fact that we're at $36 trillion in debt right now. These are fiscal conservatives. They want to see some cuts. But unfortunately, most of the cuts they want to see are in social spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, things like that, environmental programs. Uh, but anyway, right now the House is arguing, the Republicans are debating each other about this tax bill. Trump wants to give more tax cuts to the rich and to the middle class. And so anyway, that's all being worked on right now. So there's some division within the Republicans over that. In addition, though, he's also now coming out and saying he wants to spend $175 trillion on the Golden Dome, a new Star Wars program, right? And this is aimed at Russia and China. They want to have war with Russia and China, and they want to be able to deflect any retaliatory responses from Russia and China. And so he's selling this Golden Dome as the, end all be all solution that we know because of hypersonics that Russia and China have, they will be able to defeat this Golden Dome. But in the end, this is a gift to the military industrial complex. And they're very eager to accept $175 trillion more for this boondoggle. I read today that experts are saying that they think 175 trillion is a low ball figure, that it's going to cost a hell of a lot more than that. US is trying to bring Canada in on it right now to help pay for it, okay? And they're probably going to try to get other countries in NATO to help pay for it as well, because the US can't pay for it when it's $36 trillion in debt. So this is the kind of insanity that's going on right now. Nobody is in the Congress is talking any sense about anything. And it's very frustrating for everybody right now.
Let me ask you this. Um, it's 5 years now that I'm living in Russia, and Obama kind of had a honeymoon, uh, in spite of the horrific things that he did, the lies that he's told. Too many people still think that he was wonderful. He walked on water. The two Bushes, okay, and then you get Biden. Uh, the people like us who were activists, we really had those guys figured out. We had a target on their backs. I mean, what they were doing was obviously horrible and terrible and evil, and however you want to describe it. I'm just wondering if anybody is focusing on Trump and not only what he's trying to do in America, that with all these tariffs from all these other countries, it's only going to kill Americans. It's not going to hurt us in Russia because we're thriving here in Russia, and China is thriving as well. So, um, are Americans not? I mean, I'm going back to the question I asked a few minutes ago. Are they not seeing that this guy is a clown, that this guy has no substance, is very shallow, is reversing himself from one day to the next? I can't believe people aren't seeing that.
Well, half the country is, for sure, but amongst that half are a strong percentage of Democrats who only want minor changes, essentially. They want to feel like their freedoms to speak out and assemble and They want open immigration, things like that, that the Democrats support. But again, when it comes to the big money stuff, Democrats aren't going to come out strongly against Golden Dome because Democrat politicians are paid for by the military industrial complex the same way the Republicans are. Okay. Just like APAC controls the Congress, so does the military industrial complex. Here in Maine, we have Democratic uh, politicians that love to give Bath Iron Works more money to build more destroyers that are being used to encircle Russia and China today, that have been used to fight against Yemen very recently in the Red Sea. So, that's the problem with the Democratic Party. They only go so far. And so, yes, there are a lot of Democrats that think Trump is a clown, but they're not willing to take him on with these big issues, especially anything about foreign policy. I've been saying for a long time, I do not believe Trump will last for 4 years.
Mhm.
And it's not because he's going to be impeached or anything like that. It's going to be because, he's pretty old too. He's damn near the same age as Joe Biden was. And Trump, to me, he looks tired all the time. He's either going to have a heart attack because his favorite food is McDonald's hamburgers and French fries and Coca-Cola. In fact, when he recently went to Saudi Arabia set up a portable McDonald's for him in order to whet his appetite. So he's either going to have a heart attack because of his diet and his age, or he's going to have dementia. So I don't think he's going to last. And that's going to be a real problem for the MAGA movement, so to speak. They're not going to be able to, I think, find someone that unifies what will become a very splintered Republican Party once Trump is gone.
You know, there's been two attempts on his life, supposedly. Um, I felt that some of the things he's doing are challenging the globalist agenda. Uh, and I didn't predict anything, but along the same lines as you thinking, well, he could have a heart attack because of the stress of the job in the McDonald's diet, which I love. And I've said that a couple of times before. Give him a few more double cheeseburgers and fries. Uh, but also that there are people with enough anger and hatred and fear of what he's doing that there may be another attempt on his life. Um, anyway,
I
let's,
think, well, let me say this. Trump is a nationalist. He's not a globalist in that sense of the neocons.
yeah,
Okay. And so I think it's conceivable, very conceivable, that the CIA, which is controlled by the globalists, would take Trump out at some point. I think, we know that's what they did to Kennedy. We know they do that all over the world. Historically, they kill leaders of countries, particularly in places like Africa, uh, Congo, for example, uh, where they took out Lumumba. That was a CIA operation, along with Belgium. So anyway, I think it's very conceivable that Trump could be killed before too long by these forces. And if that happens, then the MAGA movement will probably go full bore armed revolution,
yeah, yeah,
and we'll have a civil war here.
yeah, yeah. And I just heard today that one of Zelensky's, uh, I don't know, former MPs, parliamentarians or something, was shot in the head today in Spain.
Mhm.
I mean, when you go against them, they'll eliminate you. All right, I want to segue, staying on Donald Trump. Uh, he wants to come across, he wants the Peace Prize. He thinks he's going to get it because of his efforts to try to force peace in Ukraine. We had a 2 hour telephone call with Trump last week, a couple of days ago. Wyckoff has met with Trump and with Lavrov. Uh, Rubio's had telephone calls with Lavrov. What do you see his role in terms of brokering a peace in Ukraine when he is actually not a neutral uh, arbitrator or neutral entity when the United States has been involved in a direct war against Russia, at least since 2014,
2014.
2012?
Yeah.
What are your
I wrote
thoughts?
about this. I wrote about this on my blog the other day. And I said, how is it possible that the United States, which started this war, first by orchestrating the coup in Kiev in 2014, installing Nazis in the military, in the intelligence, and in the police divisions of Ukraine, setting up military training bases in Western Ukraine, which I learned from you years ago. Uh, they were training the Nazis there, bringing them into the National Guard, trying to hide their various Nazi symbols on their bodies with new clean green uniforms supplied by the United States. So, how could the United States now, after all these years in this war that the US started and facilitated, and even the New York Times recently said they admitted that the CIA was directing the war, all right, all these years. So, how could the United States now be a legitimate mediator? I don't believe it. Well, just a couple of days ago, I wrote about this, and I also included a quote from Rubio, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's a fascist himself. And he basically said the reason why we've got to stop the war in Ukraine is because essentially we have other fish to fry in the Indo-Pacific region. Well, what he's talking about is China. We got to have a war with China, and that's a bigger, more important one for us than Russia. So we're going to try to stop this war in Ukraine because it's costing the United States too much money, too much military equipment, too much distraction from the big war that we need to have with China. So that's why they're doing this, and that's why they're pushing it. No other reason.
All right, so Bruce, uh, how do you see this war ending?
It's going to end one way, and I there's a blogger by the name Simplicius who sends around. He's on Substack. He sends around updates just about every day. He does great analysis of what's going on in Ukraine. And just yesterday, I was reading one of his posts that talked about all of the turmoil going on inside of the Ukrainian military. Major divisions developing within the military, anger at the leaders who are just sending people in, young people that they grab on the street, forced into the military with very little training, very little weapons, send them to the front line and they're getting killed. And the desertion rate is phenomenal. And at the same time, there are a few honest commanders who are refusing to send their troops into the meat grinder, and they're being fired. So this is all coming out now in the Ukrainian media. So this is a big step. But at the same time, Russia is obviously winning this war. People say, well, what's taken Russia so long? They were going to defeat Ukraine in a matter of short period of time. What's taken them so long? Well, I agree with those who say that Putin was not interested in having a lot of Russian soldiers killed. And so he was not just throwing his troops into the meat grinder. He was thinking and moving very strategically and in this whole war. And I think that's been his agenda. But they're now wearing Ukraine down to such an extent that they're creating encirclements all along the line of conflict, virtually 1,000-mile long line of conflict. The distance between Maine and Washington, D.C., imagine that. That's how long that line of contact is. And now, since Ukraine went into Kursk, where they've now been pushed out of, that line of contact got even bigger. So, anyway, Russia has now begun to encircle the Ukrainian troops that still remain very active in parts of the Donbass region. And they're now in big trouble. So I think this thing is heading in Russia's direction more than ever. I can't say it's going to be done by X period of time. I have no idea. But I think that the reason why Trump is pressuring Russia so much is because the United States sees that Russia is moving quickly now, and they fear that Russia will take even more territory into Ukraine, and they're worried about that.
I think they are. It's obvious from how they've changed uh, their bargaining positions. Uh, they don't seem to be insisting on this 30-day ceasefire. Uh, what they seem to be saying we want Russia and China to start talking together again. And it seems to me that what the United States is saying when Rubio talks, okay, um, okay, Europe, this is your problem. Do you see it that way that the United States and Trump is looking for an off ramp and saying, okay, this was Trump just said it today. We never should have got into this war. He said it so many times. Do you think Trump is looking now for an off ramp?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's why they're pressuring NATO countries to, it used to be put in 2% of your GDP into NATO, and now they're asking for 5% because it's the only way that they would be able to continue to fund this war. And this is further dividing the people in Europe because they're cutting back on, just like here, they're cutting back on social spending in Europe in order to help fund this war in Ukraine. And it's coming back to bite them as their economy is suffering throughout Europe and as the people are rising up in protest. What I would said earlier about Norway, that fact a new political party has started there and people are holding signs, Yankee go home, we don't want your bases here, because they know that those bases are going to be used, whether it's Norway, whether it's Sweden, whether it's Finland, they're going to be used for war against Russia. And those people know that if there's a NATO war, full blown war with Russia, they're all going to die. They know it. So there's all kinds of divisions that are developing in Europe. And this is going to, I think, also lead to Russia's victory in this war
Do
that
you
Russia never started. And that's got to be repeated again and again. This, when people say that Russia was unprovoked, bullshit. Russia was provoked for years by the United States and NATO.
um, let me ask you this before we conclude. I asked you how you thought it was going to end. Everybody's talking about, oh, now we're into a diplomatic uh, dialogue. Diplomacy is being talked about. I don't believe that for 1 minute. I don't believe diplomacy is going to solve this thing. I believe that this whole thing is a charade, that Putin is playing Trump. He's placating him. But in the next moment, Putin is saying, we're moving ahead. We're going to achieve all of our goals. Uh, the way I see it is Russia will settle this thing militarily. They will, and they always have had to. World War II, they did not finish off this fascist Nazi ideology. And if they don't do it now, if they don't finish it now, Bruce, Putin knows, everybody in the defense ministry knows, everybody in the Kremlin knows 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that snake is going to raise its ugly head and strike again.
I think Putin is sincere, very sincere, when he says that he would like a negotiated settlement, that he would like a true peace treaty to be developed. He showed this repeatedly when he negotiated the Minsk I and Minsk II agreements. And that later on, we learned about 2 years ago, Angela Merkel, the chancellor from Germany, Hollande, the prime minister from France, and then what was his name from
Poroshenko, Poroshenko.
Poroshenko. That's right, the president of Ukraine. They all admitted publicly that they only signed the Minsk agreements that would have ended the war years and years ago. They only signed it in order to buy time to build up the military to attack Russia. And so Putin knows that, of course, and he recognizes that it's likely that Trump's negotiations are going to fail because the pressure on Ukraine is so great coming from these neocons, whether they're from the United States or whether they're from Europe. The, the pressure is so great to keep the war going because they want to break Russia up into smaller countries so they can grab Russia's resource base, its vast resource base, particularly as the Arctic ice melts and you can drill, baby, drill up in that region. So this is the agenda of the neocons. And Putin knows that. And so, but I think he's an honorable man. I think he would be happy to have a real, true negotiated settlement, but he can't count on it. And so Russia has no other choice but to continue to defend their interests along their border.
All right, let me ask you this as we conclude. You've been organizing as an activist your entire adult life. We know the story. We've had it on the show several times. You and I have talked about it. Um, why do you keep fighting?
Because I'm stubborn.
No, come on.
Well, I have a son. I have a son, and he and his partner, he lives in Cambodia. They're now having a baby. And the baby is going to carry my middle name, Kenneth. Bruce Kenneth is my name. Kenneth was my father's name. And so for 3 generations in a row, that baby will carry this name. I don't say that out of ego or pride. I say that out of understanding about human survivability. I'm concerned about the future of the planet because of climate change, because of growing wars, things like that. And I'm concerned about the future generations, the next 7 generations. And so, what drives me always as an activist is trying to make sure that those that come after us have a chance to survive on this planet. And right now it's in peril. So no matter how tired I am, no matter how frustrated I am, no matter how bleak things look in this moment, and they do, I have no other choice as a human being. There's nothing more important to me as a human being than to fight for our children and our grandchildren. And that's what drives me.